Wealthy millionaire brings pregnant mistress home. Beautiful pregnant wife snaps and destroys everything. In a quiet, upscale neighborhood, lined with pristine mansions and manicured lawns, a shocking betrayal unfolds behind grand marble columns and crystal chandeliers. Sarah Hastings, loving wife and devoted mother, greets her husband Michael at the door, only to discover an unthinkable guest in tow, Chloe Addison, the pregnant mistress. A single glance is all it takes for Sarah's world to fracture into jagged pieces. Whispers of scandal echo through the corridors, fueling a furious storm that threatens to tear their privileged lives apart. This is the story of one woman's breaking point, and the chaotic fallout that will leave you breathless. Sarah Hastings had always believed that home was more than an address. It was a sanctuary. Growing up in modest surroundings, she dreamed of a life where her own children would want for nothing. In her youth, Sarah's father, James Thompson, worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Her mother, Linda Thompson, took in sewing commissions to supplement the household income. They never had luxuries, no shining sports cars, no designer handbags, no summer villas in foreign lands. But what the Thompsons lacked materially, they more than made up for in love and kindness. Sarah carried these values with her into adulthood, determined never to lose her sense of gratitude. Her life changed forever when she met Michael Hastings at a charity event organized to raise money for local hospitals. It was a gala Sarah attended as a volunteer, wearing a simple white dress she'd painstakingly saved up for. When Michael, the dashing heir to the Hastings real estate empire, walked in with an aura of effortless confidence, Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away. There was something magnetic about him, the tall, powerful frame, the way he carried himself as though the entire world was a stage and he was the lead performer. But beneath that outward arrogance, Sarah sensed a flicker of genuine warmth and generosity. Michael approached her, volunteering to match every donation made that evening. Sarah marveled at the scope of his generosity. It wasn't just empty words, he wrote. Checks, gave heartfelt speeches, even chatted with the hospital staff as though they were old friends. There was no denying his wealth, yet he possessed an uncanny ability to connect with people on a personal level. Their connection was instantaneous, a spark that turned into a quiet conversation at a corner table after the gala ended. He listened attentively to Sarah's stories about her parents and her aspirations. In return, Michael opened up about the pressure of living up to his father's monumental reputation in the real estate industry. He told her he admired her compassion, her sincerity, and her determination to carve her own path. The night ended with a gentle goodnight kiss, leaving them both on the precipice of something life-altering. Within months, their whirlwind romance was the talk of the city's social circle. Some questioned Sarah's motives, calling her a gold digger. Others doubted Michael's seriousness, convinced he was just enthralled by the novelty of dating someone who wasn't consumed by brand names and extravagant luxuries. But the doubters faded from their periphery when Michael proposed on a starlit beach in the Maldives. A simple, heartfelt vow to spend the rest of his life loving and supporting her sealed their union. Over the next 7 years, Sarah and Michael built a life that was a seamless blend of their worlds. Their home, an opulent, sprawling estate in the suburbs of Chicago, was designed to be both refined and welcoming. Sarah decorated the rooms with an eye for comfort rather than ostentatious display, filling them with photos of her parents, her old friends, and the many charitable events she hosted. A wave of warmth enveloped the Hastings mansion, turning it into a hub where extended family and dear friends gathered for holidays. Their love story seemed perfect, the kind of romance people might read about in magazines or watch in movies. From the outside looking in, they were the definition of happily ever after. But beneath the glittering surface lurked a tension. Michael's responsibilities as the new CEO of Hastings International had ballooned. He was constantly traveling, sealing deals, expanding the business. Sarah understood that he was juggling immense responsibilities, yet she couldn't ignore the undercurrent of distance growing between them. Intimate conversations dwindled to polite check-ins over dinner. Weekend getaways became impossible to schedule. Anxiety gnawed at Sarah's heart, whispering that something was amiss, though she couldn't quite pinpoint what. She pushed aside her growing doubts, focusing instead on volunteer work and her personal passion, an initiative providing housing assistance to underprivileged families. Organizing fundraisers, meeting with donors, and visiting local community centers filled Sarah's days, offering both purpose and a distraction from her unspoken worries. She convinced herself that Michael's absence was a testament to his dedication. The illusions of a perfect life kept her afloat until one evening changed everything. It started like any other night in the Hastings household. Sarah settled on the plush sofa in their living room, engrossed in reading proposal outlines for an upcoming charity ball. A slow jazz melody drifted from the integrated sound system, while flickering candles cast warm shadows across the polished floors. She was waiting for Michael. He had texted that he'd be home late from a business dinner, so she was prepared to greet him with a gentle smile and a cup of herbal tea. Despite the growing rift between them, Sarah's devotion remained unwavering. She set aside her documents, mentally rehearsing the supportive words she wanted to share with him, words meant to soothe, to reassure him that no matter the challenges at work, she was there. A little past 11, headlights cut through the darkness outside, illuminating the driveway. Michael's sleek black sedan purred into its usual spot. Relief coursed through Sarah. At least he was home safely. But as she peeked through the front window, her heart jolted violently. There was another figure in the car's passenger seat, the outline of a woman. Sarah's mind raced. Was it a colleague he was dropping off? A relative visiting? But something about the figure's body language, hesitant, yet clinging close to Michael, sent alarm bells ringing in Sarah's chest. Before she had time to compose herself, the front door opened. Michael stepped inside, exuding that familiar, confident air. Behind him stood a young woman, slender, with bright eyes and an unmistakable anxiousness etched across her delicate features. Her name was Chloe Addison, a name Sarah had never heard before. Michael's gaze darted between his wife and this newcomer. For a moment, the silence was palpable, suspended in mid-air like a drawn bowstring. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She noticed that Chloe's hand rested protectively on her stomach, which was unmistakably swollen with pregnancy. "Sarah," Michael began, clearing his throat, "there's something we need to talk about." Sarah's entire world tilted. Time slowed, every heartbeat resonating like a thunderclap in her ears. She could see the guilt in Michael's eyes, could sense the reluctance in his posture. Her mouth felt dry. She tried to speak, but no words surfaced, only the echo of her pulse pounding in her head. Chloe looked mortified, as though she was about to apologize but thought better of it. She stood there, trembling ever so slightly, while Michael continued speaking, his voice thick with forced composure. "Chloe, she's pregnant. And the baby," he hesitated, swallowing hard. "The baby is mine." A swirl of conflicting emotions seized Sarah. She wanted to scream, to cry, to fling every crystal vase across the room. But shock had its own way of robbing a person of reaction. She stood rooted to the spot, her gaze flickering from Chloe's stomach to Michael's face. The revelation of Michael's betrayal was devastating enough, but there was more to come. With an air of finality, Michael announced that Chloe would be staying with them for her safety and the baby's well-being. The words rang like a death knell in the silent foyer. Chloe offered a timid explanation for her predicament. She was alone in the city, abandoned by her estranged family. News of her pregnancy had led to a series of threats from a jealous ex-boyfriend who refused to believe the child wasn't his. And so, for reasons known only to Michael, he had decided that their home, Sarah's sanctuary, would be the safest place for Chloe to live. Sarah's instincts demanded she throw Chloe out immediately, demanded she unleash the fury clawing at her insides. But she said nothing. In that surreal moment, the only response that escaped her lips was a tremulous whisper. I need a moment. Turning on her heel, she fled up the grand staircase and locked herself in the master bedroom. The walls seemed to close in on her as she pressed her back against the door, her entire body shaking. She felt the weight of betrayal settling on her chest, suffocating and thick. The man she had trusted with her heart had not only strayed, but now wanted to bring his pregnant mistress under their roof. Downstairs, Michael tried to soothe the situation. His voice, muffled by distance, offered half-formed reassurances to Chloe. Sarah's heart twisted with an indescribable pain. The man she loved was comforting another woman, the woman bearing his child. The reality was so monstrous that it felt unreal. She paced the length of the bedroom, tears burning her eyes but refusing to fall. In the hallway, the faint hum of conversation continued. Eventually, heavy footsteps climbed the stairs and stopped right outside the door. A hesitant knock ensued, but Sarah couldn't bring herself to open it. Michael's voice was muted, carrying a plea that she couldn't bear to listen to. The dam finally broke, tears spilled over, silent sobs shaking her shoulders as she slid to the floor. An entire mosaic of her life, her marriage, her future, everything she thought she knew shattered into shards that she feared were impossible to piece back together. And yet, in the midst of that heartbreak, a spark of anger ignited. Anger at Michael for his selfishness, at Chloe for stepping into her home without shame, and at herself for letting this unfold without a fight. Michael spent the night on the living room sofa. Whether out of consideration or cowardice, he didn't push Sarah to speak further. Early the next morning, Sarah emerged from the bedroom, fueled by an uneasy mix of heartbreak and fury. She found Michael sitting at the kitchen island, a cup of coffee untouched in his hands. Eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, Chloe was nowhere in sight. The silence between them was suffocating. Finally, Michael cleared his throat. "Sarah, I know this is all too much, but I need you to understand. Chloe's situation, it's complicated. We hadn't planned for this." Sarah couldn't help but notice the contradictory nature of his words. "You hadn't planned for this," she repeated, voice quivering. "No one plans to cheat on their wife either, Michael, but that's what you did." A pained expression crossed his face. He set his coffee down. "I never meant for it to happen," he insisted, his tone laced with desperation. "I was in a bad place, traveling, meeting investors, drinking too much." Chloe worked for one of our partner firms. "It was a one-night mistake, stop," Sarah snapped, her voice echoing against the marble floors. Tears threatened to choke her words. "Don't insult me by calling it a mistake. You said you never meant it to happen, but you let it happen. You made a choice. Now you bring her here, into our home, without so much as a conversation with me." Michael raked a hand through his hair. "I didn't know how to tell you." And then her ex-boyfriend started threatening her. "She has no one else, Sarah. She's pregnant, and I can't just abandon her. It's my responsibility." Sarah laughed, the sound bitter. "Your responsibility? And where do I fit into all of this? What about my feelings, my life? You drop a bombshell and expect me to open my arms to the woman carrying your child." At that moment, Chloe entered the kitchen, looking frightened and uneasy. She held a small suitcase, her knuckles white from gripping the handle too tightly. "I can go somewhere else if this is too much," she offered, her voice trembling. Sarah glanced at Chloe, resentment swirling in her chest. A part of her recognized that Chloe was also a victim of circumstance, but the betrayal felt too raw to compartmentalize. She turned to Michael, who looked torn. "Don't look at me," Sarah said coldly. "You've made your decisions. Deal with the consequences." Despite the anger coursing through her veins, Sarah's innate compassion warred with her fury. She had spent her life aiding people in dire straits. Now, a pregnant young woman stood before her, presumably with no one else to turn to. But Sarah couldn't simply switch off the emotional devastation that raged within. She needed time. "Stay in the guest wing," Sarah finally muttered, not out of forgiveness, but out of a sense of moral obligation and confusion. She turned away, tears threatening to spill again. "I need to think." With that, she left Michael and Chloe standing in the kitchen, a stunned hush settling over them. She fled to the gardens, taking refuge among the rose bushes she had painstakingly cultivated. The sweet scent of blossoms enveloped her as she tried to steady her breath. For the next few hours, she let no one near her. Not Michael, not Chloe, not even the house staff, who tiptoed around, well aware of the tension gripping the estate. As the day wore on, Sarah considered leaving. It was her immediate impulse: pack a bag, drive away, and never look back. But the house and everything in it represented not just Michael's wealth, but also her own sense of purpose and identity. She thought of the charities she was involved with, the people she had promised to help, the staff who depended on her. And deep down, she was furious that she should be the one to run from her own home. By evening, she heard soft footsteps approach. It was her best friend, Rebecca Sterling, who had become like a sister over the years. Rebecca owned a local boutique and was one of the few people Sarah trusted with her deepest emotions. "Sarah," Rebecca whispered, gently touching her shoulder, "the staff told me you've been out here for hours. Are you okay?" Tears that Sarah had been holding back broke free as she clung to Rebecca. She recounted the horrific events: Michael's affair, Chloe's pregnancy, the sudden arrival. Rebecca listened patiently, offering tissues and an understanding presence. "I can't believe Michael would do this," Rebecca said, shaking her head. "He always seemed so devoted. And now, having the audacity to bring her here, it's all too much. What are you going to do?" Sarah wiped her tears. "I honestly don't know. Part of me wants to throw them both out. Another part of me wants to pack my things and disappear. But then there's a small voice in my head that tells me to be strategic, not impulsive." Rebecca nodded. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. Just remember to take care of yourself first. You owe him nothing after what he's done." The two friends shared a long embrace in the waning daylight. Sarah felt marginally calmer, but remained uncertain of her next steps. Michael's betrayal was colossal, and the presence of his pregnant mistress under the same roof was a ticking time bomb. Something would eventually detonate. Unbeknownst to them, behind an ornate pillar leading to the garden, Chloe had overheard every word. As much as Sarah disliked her, Chloe felt even more out of place. A wave of guilt washed over her. She had never wanted to be the wedge that tore a marriage apart, but the reality of her baby's paternity had forced her into a precarious situation. Michael's decision to house her under the same roof as his wife had done more harm than good, intensifying the heartbreak in all directions. With her hand resting on her abdomen, Chloe whispered an apology that only the roses heard. The following weeks slid by with agonizing slowness. The estate, once alive with warm laughter and cozy gatherings, now felt colder than a winter morning. Tension seeped into every corner, as though even the walls understood the betrayal that had transpired. Chloe kept mostly to her room in the guest wing, venturing out only for meals or short walks in the gardens when she assumed Sarah wasn't around. The house staff, sensitive to the precarious situation, treated Chloe with detached politeness. Though they refrained from voicing any judgment, their pitying glances were unmistakable. Michael threw himself into work, leaving the mansion early and returning well past midnight. Whether this was avoidance or an attempt to salvage what was left of his reputation within the corporate world, Sarah couldn't be sure. But the distance only fueled her growing resentment. When he was home, he tried to talk to her, to explain or apologize. Sarah refused to engage, shutting herself behind locked doors or retreating to her charity work. On the surface, Sarah maintained a calm facade. She performed her duties volunteering at community centers, attending board meetings for a housing initiative, hosting charity luncheons. But inside, her emotions churned like a storm at sea. She grappled with a tumultuous combination of heartbreak, fury, and conflicting sympathy for Chloe's predicament. Every so often their paths would cross in the mansion's sprawling hallways. Their interactions were painfully polite. Chloe would offer a timid greeting, "Hello," and Sarah would nod, never meeting her eyes. The air bristled with tension, so thick it was nearly tangible. One afternoon, Sarah found herself in the library, searching for a reference book on urban development. It was a place she had always loved, a sanctuary of floor-to-ceiling shelves, filled with everything from classic literature to business journals. She was examining a large volume when Chloe quietly entered, eyes scanning for a particular title. They locked eyes. Awkwardness paralyzed them for an instant. Sarah's grip on her book tightened. She tried to calm the swirl of emotions: resentment, pity, anger, curiosity. "I'm sorry," Chloe mumbled, breaking the silence. She started to turn away, but Sarah halted her with a measured look. "What are you looking for?" Sarah asked, her voice monotone. Chloe hesitated. "Something on prenatal nutrition. I've been having trouble sleeping, and thought I'd see if there was any advice." An uncomfortable pause settled between them. Sarah glanced at Chloe's growing belly. A wave of complicated empathy hit her. Despite her fury, she couldn't help remembering that the unborn child was innocent in this entire ordeal. She found herself guiding Chloe to a section on health and nutrition. "There should be a few books here," Sarah said softly, pulling out a thick hardcover. "This one has some good recipes and guidelines." Chloe accepted the book with trembling hands, her eyes misting. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice quivering. "I never wanted to come between you and Michael. He insisted on bringing me here when things got dangerous with my ex. I didn't ask for it." Sarah inhaled sharply, battling the urge to lash out. "Then you should have refused," she said, her tone harsher than intended. "Now we're all stuck in this mess." Chloe nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know how it looks. I know how much pain I've caused. I can't take it back." A flicker of doubt, or concern or guilt, Sarah wasn't sure which crossed her face. Before she could respond, Chloe hurried out, cradling the book as though it were her only anchor in the storm. In the immediate silence, Sarah felt an ache that went beyond betrayal. She despised what Chloe's presence represented, a flagrant violation of her marriage. Yet seeing Chloe's vulnerability and desperation stirred pangs of compassion. It was a paradox that left Sarah even more conflicted. She wanted to hate Chloe, to view her as nothing but a homewrecker, but she also recognized the complexities of the situation. The real culprit, Sarah's rational mind insisted, was Michael, who had orchestrated this chaos by his unfaithfulness and sudden attempt at atonement. That night, Sarah sat in her bedroom, staring at the reflection in the floor-length mirror. She hardly recognized the woman gazing back. Dark circles underscored her eyes, and her usual poise felt hollow. The worst part was the uncertainty. Should she divorce Michael immediately? Should she give him a chance to explain and salvage their relationship? And where did that leave Chloe and the unborn child? She pulled out her journal, a habit she'd nurtured since childhood, and began scribbling her thoughts. Anguish spilled onto the pages, raw confessions, seething rage, moments of clarity, and then more confusion. When she finally set the pen down, she felt marginally unburdened, but far from resolute. Down the hall, Michael paced restlessly in his own separate room, grappling with the ramifications of his actions. Though Sarah was unaware, he was contemplating the cost of betrayal versus the cost of redemption, torn between guilt and fear that his marriage might be irrevocably destroyed. And in the dimly lit guest wing, Chloe sobbed into her pillow, clutching her belly. She whispered apologies into the darkness, uncertain if anyone could ever forgive her or if she could ever forgive herself. Days melted into a tense cycle of avoidance and uneasy civility. One morning, as Sarah prepared to leave for a charity board meeting, she was surprised to find an uninvited guest waiting in the living room, her mother-in-law, Catherine Hastings. Catherine was a regal presence. Known throughout Chicago's elite circles, she was the kind of woman who commanded respect simply by entering a room. Her hair was styled in a neat chignon, and she wore an elegant blazer over a fitted dress. She greeted Sarah with a measured nod. "Sarah, dear," Catherine began, her tone formal but not cold. "I came as soon as I heard rumors. Where is Michael?" Sarah set her purse down, steeling herself. "At the office, most likely. He didn't mention you were coming." Catherine's eyes flickered with disapproval. "He wouldn't. The man has turned reckless. I had to learn of this scandal from an acquaintance at my country club." She gestured for Sarah to sit. Reluctantly, Sarah did, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap, bracing for a barrage of probing questions. "It's true then?" Catherine asked, her voice trembling slightly. He brought a pregnant mistress into your home?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, her name is Chloe Addison. She's in the guest wing." Catherine closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. "Of all the irresponsible, disgraceful choices my son could have made." She looked up, her expression a mix of sorrow and empathy. "Sarah, I want you to know that you are first and foremost my daughter-in-law, and I consider you family. Whatever Michael has done, I will not abandon you." Sarah blinked, caught off guard. She had half expected condemnation, or at least a lecture, from her mother-in-law. Instead, Catherine reached out and placed a hand over hers. "I know my son," Catherine continued, "and he will try to make amends in the most misguided ways. Bringing that woman here was selfish, but I also know that Michael loves you. That's why he's desperately flailing about, attempting to do right by the child while hoping to keep his marriage intact." A bitter scoff escaped Sarah's lips. "He's not doing a great job of it." "I'm torn, Catherine. Part of me wants to throw him out, to walk away from all this. But then there's this child, innocent in every sense. And I've built my life around Michael. We share everything." Catherine nodded, her gaze intent. "Believe me, dear, I understand. The Hastings name carries weight, but that weight can sometimes crush those who aren't prepared for its burdens. Michael's father was no saint either, but I will tell you something. If you decide to leave, I'll support you. If you decide to stay and fight for your marriage, I'll support you. What matters is what you can live with." An emotional lump formed in Sarah's throat. She had never felt such genuine solidarity from Catherine. For years, their relationship had been polite but distant, overshadowed by the powerful figure that was Catherine Hastings. Now, for the first time, Sarah sensed a shared understanding, as if Catherine had experienced a similar heartbreak in her own past. A soft knock interrupted them. Chloe stood at the entrance to the living room, looking hesitant. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her gaze shifting between the two women. "I didn't realize anyone was in here." Catherine's eyes narrowed, but she maintained composure. "You're Chloe," she said, an unmistakable chill in her voice. Chloe nodded, visibly wilting. She started to back away, but Catherine raised a hand, gesturing for her to stay. "I won't pretend to be pleased about this situation," Catherine said. But I also recognize that you're carrying my grandchild. As appalled as I am by your involvement with my son, I cannot ignore the fact that this unborn child will be part of the Hastings family." Chloe looked as though she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Tears pricked at her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant—" Catherine cut her off. "Perhaps you never meant harm, but harm has been done. Now we must handle the consequences like adults. It won't be easy and it won't be pleasant. But rest assured, I will make sure my grandchild is cared for." Chloe nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Sarah watched the exchange, her own emotions roiling. On one hand, seeing Chloe's remorse triggered reluctant empathy. On the other, the betrayal still felt like a fresh wound. Catherine's presence, however, brought a certain sense of order, even if that order was precarious. After Chloe retreated, Catherine turned back to Sarah. "My dear, you must decide what you want. Michael will try to juggle everything. He will fail. You hold the power here, Sarah, whether you realize it or not. Decide carefully." Without another word, Catherine rose and left, a whirlwind of unwavering composure. Though their conversation had been brief, Sarah felt a subtle sense of empowerment. Perhaps Catherine was right. Perhaps Sarah did have the power to dictate the terms of her future and, maybe, just maybe, to reclaim her dignity in the process. Sarah's mind churned relentlessly, weighed down by the swirl of conflicting emotions. The tension within the mansion was an ever-present undercurrent. Strange as it seemed, Catherine's words offered Sarah a glimmer of clarity. She needed to assert herself, to decide whether she would endure this betrayal or break free from it. Meanwhile, Michael made sporadic attempts to communicate with her. He sent text messages, "Can we talk?" or "I'm truly sorry. Please don't shut me out." Sarah ignored most of them, focusing instead on practical steps for her own well-being. She consulted with a discreet divorce attorney just to understand her rights. She also met with a marriage counselor on her own, unsure if a joint session with Michael could even be productive. All the while, she maintained her responsibilities, planning a major fundraiser that would bring business magnates, celebrities, and local community leaders under one roof to support affordable housing initiatives. Sarah threw her energy into coordinating details, from the venue to the guest list to the silent auction items. Distraction, in this case, was her only lifeline. But ignoring the elephant in the room wasn't sustainable. One evening, after a long day of negotiations with potential donors, Sarah trudged into the mansion's entrance hall only to hear raised voices echoing from the living room. She followed the sound. Michael was standing face to face with Chloe, anger and desperation twisting his features. Chloe clutched her phone, tears streaming down her face. "He won't stop calling me," she cried, referring to her aggressive ex-boyfriend. "He's threatening to show up here." Michael's fists clenched. "If he comes near this property, I'll have him arrested." "You're safe here. But you can't keep talking to him, Chloe. You should block his number." "I tried." Chloe wailed, frustration and fear gripping her. "He keeps getting a new number. I'm scared, Michael." Sarah lingered at the threshold, watching the scene. An unexpected pang of sorrow flared in her chest. Chloe's fear was tangible, and for a moment Sarah remembered that this woman was alone, no family, no stable job, pregnant, and at the mercy of men who had failed her. That empathy warred with Sarah's own sense of betrayal. Michael caught sight of Sarah in the doorway. His expression shifted. "Sarah, I'm just trying to handle this situation. Chloe's ex is harassing her." Chloe turned, her tear-streaked face contorting with embarrassment at being caught in such a vulnerable moment. She quickly looked away, guilt radiating from every pore. Sarah felt her walls bristle. The last thing she wanted was to soften toward Michael or Chloe. But the fear she saw in Chloe's eyes was raw and real. Taking a breath, Sarah stepped forward. "You need a security detail," she said calmly, addressing Chloe. "I'll ask the firm we use for event security." They can spare a couple of guards to keep watch and handle any threats. Chloe's eyes widened in gratitude, though she clearly didn't expect kindness. "Thank you, Sarah." "One, appreciate it." Michael let out a breath of relief. For a moment, the three of them stood there, an uneasy trio bound by a web of betrayal and necessity. Sarah felt the tension thrumming in the air, but she also recognized the pragmatic steps needed to protect Chloe and the unborn child. She refused to let fear or rage cloud that part of her judgment. After the immediate crisis subsided, Sarah turned to leave. Michael seized the opportunity. "Sarah, wait," he pleaded. "Please give me 5 minutes to explain." She hesitated, then relented. "Fine, 5 minutes." They moved to Michael's study, a room filled with antique mahogany furnishings and the faint smell of leather-bound books. Sarah perched on the edge of a chair while Michael stood near the window, hands in his pockets. The tension was palpable. "I know I hurt you," he began, voice husky. "I can't justify it. I was weak and stupid, letting myself have that fling with Chloe. But believe me, it was never more than that. I never loved her. I was lonely, stressed, and I let my guard down. It was a terrible mistake, and I hate myself for it." Sarah's jaw tightened. She had heard variations of this apology before. "Yet you continue to see her every day," she replied, sarcasm biting. "You've made it impossible to avoid her. She's living in our home," Michael grimaced. "Because of the baby and the threats. I can't just abandon her. If something happened to her or the child, I'd never forgive myself." Sarah met his gaze, searching for any sign of sincerity. "Fine. But what about me? You can't just expect me to act like everything's okay. You shattered my trust." He moved closer, voice low and earnest. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you, if you'll let me. But I also know you have no reason to believe me. I want you to have whatever space or resources you need. If you want to file for divorce, I won't contest it. But I don't want to lose you, Sarah." Pain flared in her chest. She looked away, tears stinging her eyes. "I don't know what I want," she whispered. "I just know that I'm tired. Tired of crying, tired of feeling betrayed, tired of pitying a woman I resent because she's carrying your child." Michael tried to place a comforting hand on her shoulder, but Sarah pulled away. She stood, reclaiming her composure. "We have a fundraiser to attend in a week," she said, shifting the conversation. "I've confirmed your presence as the keynote speaker. You'd better not embarrass me in front of our donors." A flicker of relief passed over Michael's face, as though that small concession hinted at progress. "I'll be there," he assured, "and I'll say whatever you need me to." Without another word, Sarah left. As she walked down the hallway, she felt her heart pounding. Michael's plea tugged at her old affections, but it couldn't erase the betrayal. Chloe's predicament awakened her compassion, but it couldn't negate the fact that Chloe was the living proof of Michael's infidelity. Unresolved questions loomed. Could Sarah ever truly forgive Michael? Could she ever share a home with Chloe without succumbing to bitterness? Her mind churned like a storm cloud, promising that an explosive reckoning was inevitable. And she wondered if she'd survive it with her sanity and heart intact. The night of the grand fundraiser arrived, bringing with it a flurry of anticipation and anxiety. The venue was an opulent ballroom in downtown Chicago, adorned with glittering chandeliers and floral arrangements that took Sarah's team 3 days to perfect. Guests arrived in sleek limousines and high-end sports cars, dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits. Among them were CEOs, philanthropists, celebrities, everyone who was anyone in the city's elite circles. Sarah stood near the entrance, graciously greeting attendees as they poured in. She wore a floor-length emerald gown that accentuated her graceful figure, her hair styled in an elegant updo. Outwardly, she radiated calm poise, but inside, her nerves twisted in knots. This event was crucial The funds raised would finance affordable housing projects for hundreds of underprivileged families. It was a cause that had become her lifeline, a symbol of hope amid personal turmoil. Michael arrived separately, impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo. He approached Sarah with a tentative smile, offering her an arm. She hesitated before placing her hand on his sleeve, escorting him into the heart of the ballroom. Cameras flashed as photographers documented the power couple, oblivious to the emotional chasm between them. The evening progressed smoothly at first. Waiters glided around with silver trays bearing hors d'oeuvre and champagne. A jazz quartet filled the air with lively tunes. Sarah circulated among donors, making small talk and expressing gratitude for their contributions. Occasionally, she caught a glimpse of Michael doing the same, a practiced smile on his face. They were the perfect hosts, at least on the surface. At the silent auction table, Sarah found herself standing beside Rebecca Sterling, her best friend and unwavering supporter. "You look stunning, darling," Rebecca whispered. "How are you holding up?" Sarah mustered a hollow smile. "I'm trying to get through the night without thinking about everything else." Rebecca nodded sympathetically. "Just remember, if you feel overwhelmed, I'm here." The evening's program included a series of speeches. Sarah went first, stepping onto the stage to welcome the crowd. She spoke passionately about the importance of affordable housing, about how every child deserved a safe place to call home. Her words resonated, drawing applause and pledges of support. Michael followed, delivering a polished speech that praised the city's philanthropic spirit and vowed continued corporate backing. Despite the tension between them, Sarah couldn't deny his charisma as a speaker. He effortlessly captured the audience's attention, concluding with a personal pledge to match donations up to a sizable amount. The room erupted in cheers and applause. As Michael descended the stage, he caught Sarah's eye. For a fleeting instant, the look they exchanged was tinged with lingering affection and an ocean of regret. The night wore on, and the fundraiser tallied significant pledges. By the time dessert was served, it was clear the event would surpass its target goal. Sarah felt a swell of pride, a reminder that even in the midst of heartbreak, she could still make a positive impact. But any sense of triumph was dashed when she spotted a disturbing figure by the exit. Chloe, dressed in a simple, flowy dress that accommodated her growing belly, she hovered at the periphery of the ballroom, looking lost. Panic flared in Sarah's eyes. "Why is she here?" she thought. Sarah hadn't invited Chloe, nor had she expected her to show up. Yet here she was, scanning the crowd nervously until she caught sight of Michael. A flicker of relief crossed Chloe's face. Michael excused himself from a conversation and rushed to her side. They exchanged hushed words. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the fear etched in Chloe's features. Something was wrong. The tension mounted when Chloe pulled Michael toward the entrance, as though needing his immediate help. Heart pounding, Sarah slipped away from the crowd to follow them. She found them arguing in a secluded corridor outside the ballroom. "He's here!" Chloe whispered, tears glistening. "I swear I saw him lurking near the parking lot. I'm scared." Michael placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The security detail is on its way. You're safe. Just stay calm." Sarah's arrival interrupted them. Chloe flinched, guilt marring her face. Michael turned to Sarah, looking harried. "Chloe thinks her ex is here, lurking around outside." Sarah's mind raced. This was the absolute worst time for such a crisis. A wave of anger surged through her, though she swallowed it for the moment. "All right," she said tersely. "Let's go find security and ensure she's escorted somewhere safe. This event cannot turn into a spectacle." With that, Sarah guided them to a security station at the venue's side entrance. The head of security dispatched guards to sweep the perimeter. Chloe trembled, wringing her hands, while Michael tried to console her. Furious embarrassment warred with Sarah's sense of responsibility. The last thing she wanted was for the donors or the media to witness this drama. Suddenly, a man burst in through a side door, tall, disheveled, his eyes wild with rage. "Chloe," he shouted, "you can't hide from me forever." The next few moments were a blur of chaos. Guests gasped and scrambled away. Security guards rushed forward, attempting to restrain the intruder. He lunged at Chloe, face twisted in fury. Michael positioned himself between them, grappling with the attacker. Sarah, momentarily paralyzed, watched in horror. Eventually, the guards subdued the man, pinning him to the floor. Chloe clung to Michael, sobbing, her pregnant belly shuddering. Several donors had gathered, shock etched into their expressions. Cameras flashed, capturing every second of the altercation. The man cursed and thrashed until more security personnel arrived to drag him outside, handing him over to the police. Sarah's composure unraveled. She was mortified. The event was overshadowed by scandalous drama, the type that would spread like wildfire in the media. But more than that, she was shaken by the terrifying reality of Chloe's situation. The woman was indeed in danger. As paramedics arrived to check Chloe for shock and any potential harm to the baby, Sarah found herself trembling uncontrollably. The circle of wealthy donors parted to allow emergency personnel through. Rebecca rushed to Sarah's side, enveloping her in a protective hug. "Sarah, are you okay?" Rebecca asked, voice thick with concern. Sarah could barely speak, tears threatening to spill. She glimpsed Michael cradling Chloe's face in his hands, making sure she was all right. That sight ignited a mix of fury and heartbreak. On one hand, the father of Chloe's child had stepped up to protect her. On the other, he was still Sarah's husband, who should have never been in this position in the first place. Reporters started snapping pictures, eager for a scandalous scoop on the Hastings personal drama. Sarah wiped away tears, forcing herself to rejoin the stunned donors, trying to salvage the night's success. She offered apologies, reassuring them that the intruder was in police custody and that the fundraiser would continue as planned. But a line had been crossed. As she stood among the glittering gowns and polished suits, Sarah felt a fierce storm brewing within. This was no longer a private betrayal, it had become a public debacle, and it demanded a resolution. The fallout from the fundraiser was immediate and brutal. Tabloids plastered headlines about Michael Hastings' pregnant mistress, while paparazzi circled the mansion like vultures. Sarah, humiliated and furious, shut herself away in the master suite for days, refusing to see anyone. At last she emerged, eyes red, heart aching. She found Michael and Chloe talking quietly in the living room. Rage exploded. "Enough," she whispered, voice shaking. "This ends now." The tension boiled over. In a single, shattering moment, Sarah grabbed a priceless vase and hurled it across the room. Crystal shards burst like confetti, echoing her internal devastation. She knocked over sculptures, yanked down curtains, unleashing her despair. Neither Michael nor Chloe dared move, stunned by her outburst. Breath ragged, Sarah paused amid the wreckage. "You've destroyed my life," she managed, tears brimming. "Bringing her here, parading this scandal in public, I can't bear it anymore." Michael stepped forward, hands raised. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I never wanted this," she cut him off. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Her voice wavered with finality. "Either she goes, or I do." When Michael couldn't immediately respond, Sarah's eyes flickered with heartbreak. She turned and ran upstairs to pack her bags. Moments later, she left, suitcase in hand, tears streaking her face. Michael followed, pleading for another chance. But Sarah brushed past him. Slipping into her car, she sped away from the mansion that once symbolized her fairy tale life, now just another shattered dream in the rearview mirror. Rebecca took Sarah to a discreet suite in a luxury hotel across town. It wasn't home, but at least there were no reminders of betrayal lurking in every corner. Over the next few days, Sarah tried to stabilize her life. She met with her lawyer again, discussing the potential terms of separation or divorce. She also informed her staff at the charities that she needed a brief hiatus, though she continued to oversee critical tasks remotely. The tabloids continued their feeding frenzy. Rumors circulated about who had left whom, about Sarah's meltdown, about Chloe's condition. Paparazzi lingered outside the hotel, hoping for a dramatic photograph or scandalous quote. Sarah, guarded by hotel security, ventured out only when necessary, wearing dark sunglasses and a hat to deflect attention. Rebecca was a godsend, providing both practical help and emotional support. "Take your time," she told Sarah gently. "You don't have to make a final decision about your marriage right away. Focus on healing." Healing, however, proved elusive. At night, Sarah tossed and turned, haunted by nightmares of Michael and Chloe. She oscillated between fury at Michael's betrayal and a deep sense of loss for the future she had envisioned. Sometimes she even felt pity for Chloe and concern for the unborn child. It was a tumult of emotions that left her drained. One morning, Catherine Hastings visited. The older woman had become a surprising ally. She arrived with a bouquet of fresh lilies and a gentle expression. "May I come in?" she asked, standing at the threshold of Sarah's hotel suite. Sarah hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let Catherine in. They sat in the living area, sunlight streaming through tall windows. "I heard about the incident," Catherine began, choosing her words carefully. "I can only imagine how you feel. I wanted to see if there was anything I could do for you." Sarah shook her head, tears prickling her eyes again. "I don't think anyone can fix this. I've left Michael. The tabloids are having a field day. My heart feels like it's been ripped out." Catherine placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's arm. "I'm not here to fix things. I'm here to listen. If you decide to divorce Michael, you'll have my full support. If you decide to reconcile, though, I don't see how you'll have my support. You are still my daughter-in-law, and more importantly, you're a person I care about." The sincerity in Catherine's voice loosened the tightness in Sarah's chest. She allowed herself to cry openly, leaning on Catherine's shoulder. They spent hours talking about the illusions of a perfect marriage, the heartbreak of betrayal, and the uncertain road ahead. "I always suspected that behind Michael's ambition lay vulnerabilities he didn't know how to handle," Catherine admitted with a sigh. "That doesn't excuse his actions, but perhaps it explains them." Sarah nodded, exhaustion washing over her. "I loved him so much. Part of me still does. But I don't know if I can ever look at him the same way." Catherine patted her hand gently. "Give yourself time, my dear. You'll find clarity, even if it comes piece by piece." 2 weeks after she left the mansion, Sarah found herself at a major crossroads. Her lawyer had prepared preliminary documents for a legal separation and possibly divorce. All that remained was her signature. She stared at the papers, heart pounding. Once she signed, the path to finalizing a divorce would be set in motion. Was she truly ready for that? She decided to meet Michael one last time, face to face, to see if there was any possibility of salvaging their relationship, or at least securing a closure she could live with. They agreed to meet at a secluded garden cafe on the outskirts of the city, a place that once held fond memories for them both. Sarah arrived first, choosing a table surrounded by ivy-laden trellises. The air was scented with lavender. She sipped on a cup of chamomile tea, trying to steady her nerves. When Michael finally appeared, her heart twisted at the sight of him, disheveled, thinner, and carrying an expression of deep sorrow. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Michael cleared his throat. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I wasn't sure you ever would." Sarah studied him. "I need answers, Michael. We built a life together, and then you tore it apart. I have to know if there's any reason I should consider giving us a chance." Michael swallowed hard. "Everything I did was unforgivable. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I messed up royally. The only thing I can offer you is that I will never, ever make this mistake again." I love you, Sarah, still. Always. She looked away, tears threatening. It's not just about the affair, Michael. It's about bringing Chloe into our house without considering my feelings. It's about making me a laughingstock in front of the world. He nodded, voice shaking. I know. The moment I realized she was in danger, all I could think about was protecting the baby, my child. It was never my intention to hurt you more, but I see now how reckless and heartless it was. For a few seconds, Sarah was silent. She thought of the unborn child, an innocent life that would soon enter the world bearing the weight of this scandal. She also thought about the betrayal she felt in her bones, a wound so deep that love alone might not heal it. Are you staying with Chloe? She finally asked. Michael shook his head. I've arranged a safe apartment for her, with round-the-clock security. I'm covering her expenses for the baby. But we're not. Together, if that's what you mean, it was never a relationship. It was a mistake, a colossal mistake. Sarah exhaled. She knew that even if Chloe was out of the house, the child would forever tie Michael to her. If Sarah returned, she'd be a stepmother to that baby, a living reminder of Michael's betrayal. Could she handle that? What if I can't be part of a life that includes that child? She asked bluntly, surprising herself. It sounds cruel, but I don't know if I can look at your child with another woman and not feel the pain all over again. Michael's face paled. I don't want to lie to you. The child is mine, and I'm going to be involved. I have to be, for the baby's sake. But I'd do anything to lessen your burden. Therapy, counseling, separate living arrangements, anything you need. Just don't leave me, Sarah. The raw desperation in his voice tore at her. She looked up at him, tears gathering once more. I honestly don't know, Michael. My heart is shattered. I feel like I've lost who I am. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. She allowed the contact but didn't reciprocate. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said, but I'm begging for a chance. Even if it's a slim one, I'll take it. They parted without a definitive resolution, both weighted by heartbreak. That night, Sarah returned to her hotel room, staring at the separation papers. As she picked up the pen, her mind raced with what-ifs. Could she carve out a new life alone? Could she find it in her heart to forgive and navigate a marriage scarred by infidelity? In the end, Sarah set the papers aside unsigned. She was at a precipice, balanced between her desire for autonomy and the remnants of love that still flickered within her. A final decision loomed, but it would be hers to make, and hers alone. Sarah Hastings stands at the threshold of her future, torn between walking away from the ashes of her once perfect marriage or fighting for a love forever changed. The child Michael conceived with Chloe remains an undeniable reality, a living emblem of betrayal, yet also an innocent life deserving of care. In the wake of a public scandal and an emotional maelstrom, Sarah must ultimately choose whether her heart has the strength to heal or if her dignity demands a new start on her own terms. Will Sarah allow the sting of Michael's infidelity to eclipse every good memory they ever shared? Or can she rediscover the resilience and compassion that once defined her and find a way to forgive without losing herself in the process? That answer remains her secret to hold, a final decision that will shape not just her destiny, but also the fate of everyone bound by this tumultuous story.
He was a titan of industry, a man who commanded boardrooms and built empires with the same ruthless precision he used to curate his life. She was his wife, the beautiful gentlewoman who believed his love was her greatest treasure. But when she offered him the one thing money couldn't buy, a child and heir, his response wasn't joy, but a chilling, quiet command. Get rid of it. He gave her a choice, the baby or their life of unimaginable luxury. He never imagined she would choose a third option, disappear. Now 5 years later, a mysterious new CEO has taken the helm of his biggest rival, a woman with a brilliant, merciless strategy and a name no one recognizes. But he recognizes her eyes, the same eyes that once looked at him with adoration, now burn with the cold fire of revenge. He is about to learn that the woman he tried to break has returned to break him. The world knew Adrian Blackwood as the undisputed king of the concrete jungle. His empire. Blackwood Holdings was a behemoth, its tendrils wrapped around every facet of modern life, from the skyscrapers that clawed at the clouds to the technology that hummed in the pockets of millions. He was a man sculpted from ambition and forged in the crucible of ruthless competition. His face, a mask of cold, chiseled perfection, graced the covers of financial magazines. His name whispered in equal parts reverence and fear. He was not just a millionaire. He was a creator of millionaires, a destroyer of rivals, a modern-day Midas whose touch turned everything to gold or to dust. His wife Isabella was the one soft brushstroke in his otherwise starkly defined world. She was the envy of many, the beautiful, serene woman who had captured the heart of the uncapturable Adrian Blackwood. To the outside world, she was the epitome of grace and fortune, draped in couture and dripping with diamonds, the perfect accessory to a man of his stature. They had met at a charity gala, a whirlwind romance that had culminated in a wedding so lavish it was dubbed the social event of the decade. Isabella, an art historian with a gentle soul and a love for the timeless beauty of the past, had been swept off her feet by his charisma, his power, the sheer force of his will. She saw a flicker of vulnerability beneath the steel, a man who needed the warmth she so freely offered. Their life was a meticulously curated tableau of wealth. Their penthouse apartment, a glass and steel eyrie perched atop one of his own skyscrapers, offered a panoramic god's-eye view of the city. It was a space of minimalist perfection, all clean lines, monochromatic palettes, and museum-quality art. Yet for all its breathtaking beauty, it was a home that held its breath. The silence was often broken only by the distant hum of the city below, or the soft, almost apologetic chime of a grandfather clock in the cavernous hallway. It was a beautiful cage, and Isabella, though she loved Adrian fiercely, was beginning to feel the press of its golden bars. Adrian's love was a possessive, controlling thing. He adored her, of that she was certain, but he adored her in the same way he adored his collection of rare sports cars, or his priceless Damien Hirst sculpture. She was a beautiful object to be admired, to be shown off, to be kept pristine and untouched by the ugliness of the world. He dictated her schedule, chose her friends, and even curated her wardrobe, his praise the currency for which she unwittingly bartered her own identity. She had given up her career at the museum, her small circle of bohemian friends, her quiet life of books and art, all for him. And for a time his love had been enough, but a quiet, insistent longing had begun to bloom in Isabella's heart, a desire for something more, something real, something that was truly hers. A child, an heir to the Blackwood dynasty? Yes, but more than that. A tiny, warm, living being to fill the echoing silence of their lives, to infuse their gilded cage with the chaotic, messy, beautiful reality of love. She imagined a small hand in hers, the sound of laughter bouncing off the cold marble floors, a reason to exist beyond being Mrs. Adrian Blackwood. She had been feeling unwell for weeks, a persistent fatigue, and a new sensitivity to the world around her. At first she had dismissed it as the languor that sometimes crept upon her in her idle life. But then a dawning, electrifying possibility had taken root. With trembling hands, she had taken a home pregnancy test, the 2 stark pink lines appearing like a miraculous, life-altering sunrise. Joy pure and unadulterated had flooded her so potent it left her breathless. This was it. This was the key. The answer, the one thing that would transform their perfect house into a real home. This would surely melt the final layer of ice around Adrian's heart. He would be a father. The fierce protectiveness he showed for his company, for her, would now be directed towards their child. She imagined him, the great Adrian Blackwood, brought to his knees by the tiny grasp of his own son or daughter. She decided to tell him that evening. He was hosting a dinner party, a command performance for a coterie of his most powerful business associates and their lacquered wives. Isabella, as always, was the perfect hostess. She moved through the glittering crowd with an ethereal grace, a secret smile playing on her lips, her hand instinctively, protectively straying to her still flat stomach. The gown Adrian had chosen for her, a column of silver silk that shimmered like moonlight on water, felt different tonight. It felt like a chrysalis, the beautiful casing for the incredible transformation happening within her. Later, after the last guest had departed, leaving behind the ghost of expensive perfume and the faint scent of cigar smoke, she found Adrian in his study. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the city lights a carpet of captured stars at his feet. The power that radiated from him was almost a physical force. Adrian. She began, her voice softer than she intended. He turned his eyes the color of a stormy sea, fixing on her. A faint smile touched his lips, the rare, possessive smile that always made her heart flutter. You were magnificent tonight, my love. The perfect hostess. They were all enchanted by you. Thank you, she said, her heart hammering against her ribs. She walked towards him, her silver gown whispering against the plush carpet. She took a deep breath, her eyes shining with all the love and hope in her heart. Adrian, I have something to tell you. Something wonderful. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine curiosity in his gaze. Oh, we're going to have a baby. The words tumbled out soft and full of wonder. I'm pregnant. She waited for the explosion of joy, the embrace, the triumphant laugh. She waited for him to sweep her into his arms, to share in the monumental, world-altering significance of her announcement. Instead, the silence in the room deepened, becoming heavy, suffocating. The faint smile on Adrian's face did not widen. It simply vanished. His eyes, which a moment ago had held a spark of warmth, turned to chips of ice. The hand holding the whiskey glass was perfectly still. He looked at her, truly looked at her, but the man she loved had been replaced by the cold, calculating CEO of Blackwood Holdings. And then he spoke, his voice quiet, devoid of any emotion, a voice that could sign off on the destruction of a company with the same chilling calm. No, he said. Isabella's smile faltered. No what? What do you mean? No. I mean, no, he repeated, taking a small, deliberate sip of his whiskey. You will not be having a baby. You will make an appointment. You will get rid of it. The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. The air rushed from her lungs. The glittering city lights blurred into a meaningless smear. Get rid of it, she whispered the words, tasting like poison in her mouth. Adrian, this is our child, our baby. "It is a complication," he said, turning his back on her to once again face the city he owned. "A distraction. Our life is perfect as it is. A child changes everything, and not for the better. The noise, the mess, the demands. It is an unacceptable disruption to our business, to our lives. A disruption." She repeated, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and a dawning, horrifying understanding. "Adrian, it's a life. Our life together. I thought you would be happy." He finally turned back to her, his face an unreadable mask of stone. "Happiness is a well-managed portfolio, Isabella. It is a rising stock price. It is the acquisition of a rival. It is not soiled diapers and sleepless nights. Our marriage is an asset, a successful merger of my public image and your beauty. A child is a liability." Tears welled in her eyes, hot and bitter. "So that's all I am to you. An asset. A part of your portfolio." "You are my wife," he said, as if that explained everything. "And you will do as I say. I have built this life for you, for us. I have given you everything you could ever desire. I will not have it jeopardized by this sentimentality." He walked over to his desk, his movements precise and controlled. He picked up a pen and a piece of his personal embossed stationery. He scribbled a name and a number on it. It was the name of a private clinic, one known for its discretion and its wealthy clientele. He held it out to her. "Make the call tomorrow. I will have my assistant arrange everything. We will go away for a week to the Maldives, perhaps. When we return, this will all be forgotten. A minor inconvenience successfully dealt with." Isabella stared at the piece of paper, at the elegant, sloping script of her husband's handwriting. It was a death warrant for her child, for her hopes for the love she had believed was real. In that one devastating moment, the beautiful gilded cage Adrian had built for her revealed itself for what it truly was, a prison, and she, its beautiful, prized captive. The tears that had been welling in her eyes now fell freely, tracing cold paths down her cheeks. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had loved with every fiber of her being, and saw a stranger, a monster in a bespoke suit. She didn't take the piece of paper. She didn't say another word. She simply turned and walked out of the study. Her silver gown, once a symbol of her beautiful life, now feeling like a shroud. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed once, a lonely, mournful sound that echoed the shattering of her heart. Adrian Blackwood had made his demand. He had drawn his line in the sand. And as Isabella walked through the silent, cavernous rooms of their perfect home, a new, terrifying and yet liberating thought began to take shape in her mind. He had given her a choice, the baby or their life together. But he had never, not for 1 second, considered that she might just choose the baby and a life of her own. The king had made his decree, but he had forgotten one crucial thing, even the most beautiful songbird. When its cage becomes a tomb, we'll find the will to fly. The night was a long, dark and sleepless torment. Isabella lay in their vast, cold bed, the space beside her empty. Adrian had not come to her. He had remained in his study, the Titan in his tower, confident in his decree, certain of her compliance. The thought was a fresh stab of pain. He didn't see her as a partner, a person with her own heart and mind. He saw her as an extension of his will, a beautiful automaton programmed for obedience. Every kick of the tiny life inside her was a silent, powerful protest against his command. This was not a complication. This was a person, her person. A fierce, primal wave of protectiveness washed over her, so potent it extinguished the last embers of her naive love for Adrian. The man she had adored was a phantom, an illusion she had desperately wanted to believe in. The real Adrian Blackwood was the one who had looked at her with eyes as cold as a winter sea and ordered the termination of their child as if it were a failing business venture. As dawn broke, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and grey, Isabella made her decision. It was a choice born of terror and a strength she never knew she possessed. She could not stay. She could not sacrifice her child for a life that had been revealed as a hollow, gilded sham. She would disappear. Her movements were quiet, furtive, like a thief in her own home. She bypassed her vast walk-in closet, a treasure trove of designer clothes and jewels that Adrian had curated for her. They were not hers. They were part of the costume for the role of Mrs. Blackwood. Instead, she found a small, forgotten suitcase in a storage room, a relic from her life before Adrian. Into it, she packed the few things that felt truly her own. A worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude, a framed photograph of her parents, a simple, faded sundress that she had loved. She took no jewelry, save for the simple gold locket her grandmother had given her, which she wore around her neck, hidden beneath her blouse. She paused her hand, hovering over her wedding and engagement rings, glittering obscenely on her dressing table. With a surge of revulsion, she left them. They were shackles, not symbols of love. The final and most crucial part of her plan required a level of cunning she was surprised to find within herself. She knew Adrian's world was one of surveillance and control. Her credit cards would be tracked. Her known associates watched. She needed cash and a way to vanish from the grid. She remembered a conversation she'd overheard Adrian having weeks ago. A boastful, careless remark about a rainy day. Fund, a physical safe hidden in his home office behind a false panel in the mahogany bookcase. He had been gloating to a business partner about having untraceable assets, a contingency for unforeseen market volatility. The irony was not lost on her. He was about to experience a different kind of volatility. Her heart hammered as she slipped into his inner sanctum, the room where her dreams had been so cruelly executed just hours before. The air was still thick with the scent of his whiskey and his cold, unyielding authority. Following the memory of his words, she ran her fingers along the spines of leather-bound first editions. Behind a copy of The Art of War, she felt a slight give. The panel clicked open, revealing a small black digital safe. Her blood ran cold. A code. Of course there was a code. She tried the obvious, his birthday, the date of their anniversary, the ticker symbol for his company. Nothing. Panic began to bubble in her chest. Then her eyes fell on the framed photograph on his desk. It was the only personal item in the entire room, a picture of him, with his late father, a man who had started the Blackwood Empire, from nothing, a man Adrian both revered and desperately sought to surpass. She remembered Adrian once mentioning the date his father had founded the company, a date he spoke of with almost religious reverence. With trembling fingers, she punched in the 6 digits. The safe beeped and clicked open. Inside were stacks of cash euros, dollars, Swiss francs, and several bearer bonds as untraceable as currency. She took a fraction of it, enough to survive, to build a new life, but not enough to suggest a calculated, greedy theft. She was leaving a life of unimaginable wealth. She was not a thief. She was a refugee. Just as she was closing the safe, her eyes caught something else, a slim leather-bound journal tucked into the back. It was her husband's private journal. A wave of guilt washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by a desperate need to understand. She took it. It was a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, it held a key, a clue, a reason. With the cash and the journal secured in her bag, she penned a short, simple note. Adrian, I cannot do what you ask. I am choosing my child. Do not look for me. Isabella. She left it on her pillow, a final stark message in the vast empty bed. Then, with one last lingering look at the life that had almost cost her everything, she walked out. She didn't take the private elevator. She took the service lift, her simple suitcase a stark contrast to the opulence she was leaving behind. She emerged into the bustling, anonymous streets of the city, a ghost leaving a palace. Her first stop was a small, out-of-the-way electronics store. She paid cash for a cheap, disposable phone and a new SIM card. Her old phone, the one Adrian had given her, she dropped into a public trash can. It was her digital leash, and she was now free of it. Next, she went to Grand Central Station, the great, teeming heart of the city. She bought a one-way ticket on a train heading west, a destination chosen at random. As the train pulled out of the station, leaving the city skyline and the Blackwood Tower behind, Isabella finally allowed herself to breathe. The tears came then not of sorrow, but of a terrifying, exhilarating freedom. She was alone, pregnant, and running into an unknown future. But she was alive, and so was her child. In the days that followed, Isabella became a phantom. She moved from town to town, always paying in cash, never staying in one place for more than a night or two. She cut her long, dark hair short, dyed it a mousy brown, and bought plain, unassuming clothes from thrift stores. The beautiful and elegant Isabella Blackwood was gone, erased. In her place was a quiet, determined woman who was fighting for her life. During the long, lonely nights in cheap motel rooms, she read Adrian's journal. What she found chilled her to the bone. It was not a diary of emotions, but a cold, calculating ledger of his life. He wrote of business deals, of corporate espionage, of the strategic takedown of his rivals. He wrote of her, Isabella, not with love, but with a chilling detachment. She was his greatest acquisition, a valuable social asset, her beauty and grace a significant boost to the Blackwood brand. He detailed his plans for their future, a future that included no children, whom he referred to as unnecessary drains on resources and emotional capital. He believed love was a weakness, a sentiment that could be exploited by his enemies. The journal was the final, brutal confirmation of the truth she had been too blind to see. He had never loved her. He had only owned her. Her journey eventually led her to a small, quiet town in Oregon, nestled in a valley and surrounded by towering pine trees. It was as far from the cold, steel and glass world of Adrian Blackwood as she could get. She rented a small, furnished apartment above a bookshop using a fake name and a story about being a writer seeking solitude. The town, with its close-knit community and its gentle pace of life, began to heal her. She found a part-time job working in the bookshop, the scent of old paper and ink, a soothing balm to her fractured soul. As her pregnancy advanced, she found an unexpected network of support. The women in the town, the bookshop owner, the doctor at the local clinic, the other expectant mothers in her prenatal yoga class, they wrapped her in a cocoon of kindness and genuine care. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as an accessory or an asset, but as a person. One crisp autumn evening, as she sat by her window watching the leaves fall, she felt a strong, definite kick. She placed her hands on her belly and smiled a real, genuine smile. She had made it. She was safe. And she was not alone. She had her child, a tiny, resilient warrior who had fought alongside her from the very beginning. Meanwhile, back in the city that had been her prison, Adrian Blackwood was a man unmoored. Her disappearance had been a blow not to his heart, but to his pride, his control. He had been furious, his rage echoing through the silent penthouse. He had hired the best private investigators money could buy, commanded them to scour the earth for her. But Isabella had vanished without a trace. Her credit cards were untouched. Her friends knew nothing. Her digital footprint had simply ceased to exist. It was as if she had dissolved into thin air. For Adrian, it was the ultimate infuriating betrayal. Not of love, but of ownership. A prize asset had been stolen from him, and he could not get it back. His life, once so perfectly ordered, now had a glaring, untidy loose end. And as the weeks turned into months, the silence in the penthouse began to change. It was no longer the peaceful, controlled silence of his own making. It was a hollow, mocking silence, a constant reminder of the one thing he could not control, the one person who had dared to defy him. The king was still on his throne, but for the first time his castle felt empty, and he was alone. Utterly and absolutely alone. The birth of her son, Leo, was the moment Isabella was truly reborn. In the sterile, quiet room of the small town hospital, as she held her tiny, perfect child for the first time, the last vestiges of the timid, broken woman she had been were washed away. In their place rose a fierce, unyielding love, a purpose so profound it reshaped her very soul. Leo, with his tuft of dark hair and his impossibly small fingers wrapped around hers, was her world. He was the reason she had run, the reason she had survived, and now he was the reason she would fight. The first few years were a struggle. Money was tight, and the fear of being found was a constant low-level hum beneath the surface of her new life. But there was also a richness she had never known in her gilded cage. There was the joy of Leo's first smile, his first steps, the sound of his laughter filling their small apartment. There was the quiet satisfaction of earning her own money, however meager, at the bookstore. She was no longer defined by a man, but by her own resilience and her love for her son. She devoured books on business, finance, and technology, the subjects that had once been Adrian's exclusive domain. Her mind, once soft and pliable, sharpened. She discovered a surprising aptitude for strategy, for seeing patterns and opportunities where others saw only chaos. The bookstore owner, a kind, astute woman named Margaret, noticed her talent. She began giving Isabella more responsibilities, consulting her on inventory, on marketing, on the future of their small business in an increasingly digital world. It was Margaret who unwittingly set Isabella on her new path. "You have a mind for this, my dear," she said one afternoon, looking at the impressive sales figures Isabella's new online strategy had generated. "A real killer instinct. You remind me of a young woman I once knew who went on to build an empire." The words sparked something in Isabella. A killer instinct. She had one. It was the same instinct that had guided her out of Adrian's life, the same instinct that fueled her ferocious love for her son. But what if she could channel it into something more? What if she could build something of her own? Something to protect Leo, to give him the future he deserved. She began to study the corporate world with a new hungry intensity, and her focus inevitably drifted back to the world she had fled, to Blackwood Holdings and to its chief rival, a dynamic but struggling tech firm called Phoenix Enterprises. Phoenix had innovative ideas, brilliant engineers, but lacked the ruthless leadership and strategic direction to truly challenge Adrian's dominance. It was an eagle with clipped wings, powerful but unable to soar, using a pseudonym. Isabella began participating in online investment forums, her analyses of Phoenix's stock and market position so sharp and insightful that she began to gain a following. She saw their weaknesses, their missed opportunities, their potential. She saw a path to victory where they saw only a stalemate with Blackwood Holdings. Her anonymous online persona nemesis became a legend in certain financial circles. Her predictions were uncannily accurate, her strategic advice brilliant. She caught the attention of the board of Phoenix Enterprises, who were desperately seeking a new leader, a new vision to save their company from being swallowed by the Blackwood behemoth. They tried to discover the identity of this mysterious nemesis, but Isabella, ever cautious, had covered her tracks perfectly. Then Leo had a health scare, a severe asthma attack that had landed him in the hospital, his small body struggling for breath. The fear she felt was a cold, sharp knife in her heart. The local clinic was wonderful, but they didn't have the specialists or the advanced equipment he might one day need. For the first time, Isabella felt the sharp pinch of her limited resources. Her son deserved the best, the kind of security that only real power and wealth could provide. That night, she made a decision. It was time to stop hiding. It was time to fight. It was time to take what she wanted, what she had earned. She reached out through a carefully constructed series of encrypted emails to the chairman of the Phoenix Enterprises board. She laid out a daring multi-year strategy to not only save the company, but to challenge and ultimately surpass Blackwood Holdings. It was audacious, brilliant, and utterly ruthless. The board was stunned and intrigued. They agreed to a clandestine rendezvous in a neutral city. Isabella spent weeks preparing. She used the last of her emergency funds to buy a simple but elegant power suit. She had her hair professionally cut and styled the mousy brown, replaced by a chic, sophisticated dark auburn. She practiced her pitch, her voice, her posture, forging herself into the woman she needed to be. The woman who could walk into a room of powerful men and command their respect. The woman who could face Adrian Blackwood and not flinch. When she walked into the boardroom at the Four Seasons in Geneva, the board members saw a woman they did not recognize. She was no longer the soft, gentle Isabella. She was a vision of cool, confident power. She introduced herself not with her old name, but with a new one, a name of her own, making Anya Sharma. She delivered her presentation without a single note, her voice calm and steady, her arguments irrefutable. She dismantled their current business model and rebuilt it before their eyes, her vision so clear, so compelling that it left them breathless. She answered their questions with a precision and insight that belied her years. She spoke of market trends, of disruptive technologies, of corporate warfare. She spoke Adrian Blackwood's language, but with a creativity and daring he had never possessed. They were captivated. They were convinced. By the end of the meeting, they had offered her the position of CEO. Isabella, now Anya Sharma, accepted. Her salary was astronomical, her power immense. Her first act was to move her headquarters to bring the fight directly to her enemy's doorstep. Phoenix Enterprises would now be based in the same city as Blackwood Holdings. She bought a beautiful, secure home in a quiet, exclusive neighborhood, a home with a large green garden for Leo to play in. She hired the best tutors, the best doctors. She gave her son the world she had dreamed of for him, a world of safety and opportunity. and then she turned her attention to her enemy. For 5 years, Adrian Blackwood had continued his reign, his company growing, his power seemingly absolute. He had never remarried. No woman could ever live up to the perfect image he had constructed of Isabella in his mind, the beautiful, obedient wife. Her disappearance was a cold, hard knot of failure in the pit of his stomach, the one acquisition that had gotten away. He had, over the years, almost managed to forget her, to bury her memory under mountains of money and success. Then the news broke. Phoenix Enterprises, his perpetually weak and struggling rival, had appointed a new CEO, a complete unknown. Anya Sharma. The business world was buzzing. Who was this woman? Where had she come from? Adrian at first was dismissive. It was a desperate, foolish move by a dying company. But then Phoenix began to move. They poached 2 of his top executives. They launched a new product, so innovative and disruptive that it sent shockwaves through the market, directly challenging Blackwood's flagship technology. They outmaneuvered him on a crucial acquisition, a company he had been certain was his. Anya Sharma was not just a new CEO. She was a predator. She moved with a speed and a strategic brilliance that Adrian had never encountered before. She seemed to anticipate his every move, to know his playbook inside and out. It was uncanny. It was infuriating. He had to meet this woman. He had to see the face of his new and surprisingly formidable rival. He arranged a meeting, a courtesy call, between the 2 CEOs at a neutral location. Adrian walked into the private dining room of a Michelin-starred restaurant, his usual aura of supreme confidence firmly in place. He was ready to intimidate, to dominate, to put this upstart in her place. And then he saw her. She was standing by the window, her back to him, looking out at the city. She turned a cool, polite smile on her face. "Mr. Blackwood, thank you for meeting me." The world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from his face. It was her. It was Isabella. But it wasn't. The soft, gentle woman he had known was gone. In her place was a stranger, a woman with his wife's face, but with eyes that held the cold, hard glitter of a diamond. Eyes that looked at him not with love, not with fear, but with the cool, appraising gaze of an equal, of an enemy. "Isabella," he whispered the name, a ghost on his lips. Her smile did not waver. "I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else," she said, her voice as smooth and cold as polished steel. "My name is Anya Sharma. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." He stared at her, his mind reeling, the pieces of the puzzle crashing together with devastating force. The uncanny knowledge of his strategies, the ruthless, brilliant attacks on his company, the 5 years of silence. It was all her. The woman he had tried to break, the woman he had discarded, had disappeared, and she had returned as the CEO of his rival, a queen, forged in the fires of his own cruelty, ready to burn his kingdom to the ground. The dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare, and Anya was its undisputed grand master. For Adrian, it was like dining with a ghost, a beautiful, terrifying ghost who wore his wife's face and wielded a power that directly threatened his own. He was thrown completely off balance, his usual arsenal of intimidation and charm rendered useless. Every question he asked, every attempt to break through her facade, was met with the same cool, polite, and impenetrable wall. "You have my wife's face," he said, his voice tight, dispensing with the pleasantries. Anya took a delicate sip of her wine, her eyes meeting his over the rim of the glass. "A fortunate coincidence for you then, Mr. Blackwood. It must be comforting to see a familiar face in a new rival. But I assure you, I am my own woman. My history is in finance, not in a museum. The barb was subtle, but it landed with surgical precision. He tried to probe to find a crack in her armor. Where did you study? Who did you work for? Before Phoenix? My resume is a matter of public record. Should you care to look? She replied smoothly, though she knew he would find a carefully fabricated but impeccable work history. She had spent a small fortune and called in every favor to construct the identity of Anya Sharma, a brilliant but reclusive financial prodigy who had made her fortune in private equity in Europe. It was a ghost story, but a believable one. But I find discussions of the past to be unproductive. I am far more interested in the future, specifically the future of the market share currently held by Blackwood Holdings. Adrian felt a surge of his old anger. You're playing a dangerous game. Phoenix Enterprises is a minnow swimming in a shark tank. My shark tank. Anya's smile was thin and sharp. Perhaps the minnow has evolved, Mr. Blackwood. Perhaps it has grown teeth. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a confidential conspiratorial tone. For instance, your upcoming bid for the government's 5G infrastructure contract. A cornerstone of your 5-year growth plan, I believe. It would be a shame if a competing bid, one that is more innovative, more cost-effective and, dare I say, more ethically sourced, were to be submitted. Adrian's blood ran cold. The details of his bid were one of the most closely guarded secrets in his company. How could she possibly know? The thought that she had a mole, a spy deep within his organization, was a violation he couldn't stomach. The paranoia began to creep in. Who could he trust? The dinner ended with a cool, formal handshake. Adrian left in a state of turmoil he hadn't experienced since his company's tumultuous early days. He felt outmaneuvered, exposed. He had gone to the meeting to assess a rival, and he had left feeling like he was the one who had been dissected and found wanting. He went back to his office and did what he did best. He declared war. He launched a ruthless campaign against Phoenix, cutting prices on his products to undercut theirs, launching a smear campaign in the financial press and poaching their key suppliers. He would crush Anya Sharma and her upstart company. He would remind her who was king. But Anya was always one step ahead. It was as if she had a copy of his playbook, because in a way she did. She had lived with the author. She knew his arrogance, his blind spots, his reliance on brute force over subtlety. For every move he made, she had a countermove ready. He cut prices. She launched a premium high-end version of her product that appealed to a different demographic, creating a new revenue stream. He smeared her in the press. She gave an exclusive, charming interview to a respected journalist, painting herself as a dynamic innovator, and him as a corporate dinosaur, trying to stifle competition. He poached her suppliers. She had already secured exclusive contracts with new, more innovative partners overseas. The battle for corporate supremacy raged, and the business world watched enthralled. Anya Sharma was a phenomenon. She was fearless, brilliant, and she was winning. Phoenix's stock soared while Blackwood Holdings began to show its first signs of vulnerability in over a decade. Adrian became obsessed. He had his security team run every possible background check on Anya Sharma, but they came up with nothing. Her fabricated past was a fortress. He had his investigators try to trace Isabella's path, but the trail was 5 years cold. He was fighting a ghost and a genius, and they were one and the same person. The pressure began to take its toll. Adrian. The man who prided himself on his icy control became volatile, his temper flaring in board meetings, his decisions becoming more reactive and less strategic. The silence of his penthouse apartment no longer felt like a symbol of his power. It felt like a cavernous, empty tomb. He found himself staring at the space on the dressing table where Isabella's rings used to lie. He had ordered her to abort their child, had called it a liability. Now his entire empire was threatened by the woman he had so casually cast aside. The irony was a bitter, indigestible pill. Meanwhile, Anya's life was a carefully balanced symphony of power and sorrow. Her days were spent in the war room, masterminding Phoenix's rise. But her evenings belonged to Leo. She would leave the cutthroat world of business at the door of her beautiful warm home and become just Mum. They would build Lego castles, read stories, and bake cookies. Leo was a bright, happy, and loving child, oblivious to the corporate war being waged for his future. He was her anchor, her true north, the reason for her fight. One evening, as she was tucking him into bed, he looked at her with his serious dark eyes so like his father's. "Mum," he asked, "do I have a dad?" Anya's heart clenched. It was the question she had been dreading. She sat on the edge of his bed and took his small hand. "Everyone has a father, sweetie," she said softly. "Yours, he lives very far away, and he wasn't able to be a part of our lives." "Is he a good person?" Leo asked, his voice small. Anya hesitated. What could she say? How could she explain the man who was both his father and her nemesis? "He's a very powerful man, Leo," she said carefully. "But sometimes powerful people make mistakes. They hurt people they are supposed to love. The most important thing for you to know is that your mom loves you more than anything in the entire world, and I will always, always keep you safe." She kissed his forehead, her love for him a fierce protective fire. As she walked out of his room, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about ensuring that Adrian Blackwood could never again harm her or her son. It was about building a fortress around their lives, so strong that his shadow could never touch them again. The war was about to escalate. Anya knew that to truly win, to secure her son's future and topple Adrian's empire, she couldn't just keep countering his moves. She had to land a decisive, crippling blow. And she knew just how to do it. She had something Adrian didn't. She had his journal, the cold, calculating ledger of his sins. For years she had kept it locked away, a painful reminder of the man she thought she knew. But now she saw it for what it was, a weapon that contained details of deals, of tactics, of a corporate philosophy so ruthless it bordered on the illegal. It was the key to his destruction. But using it was a risk. It would expose her own past her identity as Isabella. It would bring the private war into the public eye. And she didn't know how that would affect Leo. As she wrestled with the decision, a new player entered the game, a twist she could never have anticipated. She received an anonymous email. It contained a single encrypted file. When she opened it, she found a detailed dossier on a series of secret offshore accounts held by Blackwood Holdings accounts used for illicit payoffs and to hide undeclared profits. It was a smoking gun proof of massive financial fraud. At the bottom of the email was a single sentence: "He destroyed my family too. Use this, a friend." Anya stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She wasn't the only person Adrian Blackwood had ruined. She had an ally, a ghost from Adrian's past who wanted revenge as badly as she did. The journal was her weapon, but this was a nuclear bomb. Adrian Blackwood thought he was fighting a business rival. He had no idea he was fighting a coalition of the damned, the ghosts of his own making rising up to claim their pound of flesh. The final act was about to begin, and the fall of the king was imminent. The anonymous email landed in Anya's encrypted inbox like a thunderbolt. It was a dossier dense with financials, routing numbers and dates, a meticulously detailed map of Adrian's secret empire of fraud. The message attached was brief, chilling in its simplicity. "He destroyed my family too. Use this, a friend." The words confirmed a grim reality. She was not the only ghost haunting Adrian Blackwood. He had built his kingdom on a graveyard of ruined lives, and now the spirits were rising. This dossier was more than a weapon. It was a mandate. Her original plan for a precise surgical takedown felt insufficient. This was no longer just about her or Leo. It was about justice, the kind of justice that requires a public stage and a fallen king. While Anya forged her new weapon, Adrian was spiraling in his own fortress of paranoia. The war with Phoenix was a bleeding wound to his pride and his company's bottom line. His board was whispering his investors were nervous, and the aura of invincibility he had cultivated for decades was beginning to crack. In his desperation, he ordered his investigators to abandon all pretense of subtlety and dig into every aspect of Anya Sharma's personal life. He wanted a weakness, a pressure point he could squeeze until she broke. They found one. They found Leo. When the file containing the investigator's report and a candid photograph of the boy landed on his desk, Adrian's world came to a halt. He stared at the picture of the small child playing in a park, his dark hair ruffled by the wind, his expression one of serious concentration as he examined a ladybug on his finger. It was like looking at a phantom. He saw his own father's eyes, his own childhood face staring back at him. The age, the timeline, the uncanny resemblance, the pieces slammed together with the force of a physical blow. This was not Anya Sharma's son. This was his. The complication he had ordered erased from existence. A storm of emotion the likes of which he hadn't felt since he was a powerless boy himself ripped through him. There was shock, yes, and a flicker of something that might have been regret, a ghost of a lost future. But these were swiftly consumed by the emotion that had guided his entire life, possessiveness. The boy was a Blackwood. He was his, an asset that had been stolen from him. In the twisted calculus of his mind, regret transformed into rage, and rage into a strategy. He saw a path to victory, a way to reclaim everything. He would take the boy. He unleashed his legal team, a pack of sharks who smelled blood in the water. A lawsuit was filed, a brutal public petition for paternity and full custody of Leo Blackwood. The documents painted Anya Isabella as a manipulative, unstable kidnapper who had abducted his son and was now using him as a pawn in a corporate vendetta. He would prove she was an unfit mother and take back what was his. When the papers were served, Anya felt not grief or fear, but a fury so cold and pure it was almost serene. He had done the unthinkable. He had weaponized their child. He had aimed his cannons not at her corporate empire, but at her heart, at the one pure and sacred thing in her life. The war was no longer about stocks and market share. It was about survival. He had left her no choice. He had to be annihilated, his power to harm her or her son erased from the earth. The stage for the final act was the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, the venue for the annual Blackwood Holdings shareholder meeting. This was Adrian's cathedral, the place where he renewed his vows of power before his disciples. He stood at the podium, a vision of bespoke confidence, his voice resonating through the opulent room as he spun tales of future growth and dismissed the temporary market turbulence caused by his rival. He was mid-sentence when the grand doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. Anya Sharma walked in. A hush fell, a wave of shock silencing the room. She was the enemy, the serpent in their garden, and she had just breached the gates of the palace. She was not alone. Holding her hand was Leo, his small face a mask of solemn curiosity. Behind them walked Margaret, the kindly bookstore owner, who had been her first ally, her presence a symbol of the life Anya had built from the ashes. Adrian froze, his face paling. "Security," he snarled, his voice cracking. "Remove her." "I don't think you want to do that, Adrian," Anya said. Her voice, calm and steady, was picked up by the microphone she carried, and it echoed through the silent room. She began to walk slowly towards the stage, a queen advancing across a chessboard. "I believe I have a right to be here. You see, I recently became the majority shareholder in the holding company that owns the largest institutional block of your stock. Enough, I believe, to call for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO." Gasps and frantic whispers erupted. The press corps surged forward like a wave. She stopped at the foot of the stage, her eyes locking onto Adrian's. "Most of you know me as Anya Sharma. That is the name I chose for myself, but the name I was given was Isabella." She paused, letting the weight of the name settle. "Isabella Blackwood." The room exploded. "I am his wife," she continued, her voice cutting through the pandemonium. She gestured toward the entrance where Leo stood, his hand now clutching Margaret's tightly. "And that is his son. The son he ordered me to abort 5 years ago because he was a liability to his perfectly curated life." She held up a slim, leather-bound journal. "I have here Adrian's private thoughts, a record of his business dealings, his contempt for the law, his belief that blackmail and intimidation are just tools of the trade. It makes for fascinating reading." Then she delivered the killing blow. "But I also have something more concrete. I have irrefutable proof, which my legal team is distributing now, of a massive multi-year tax fraud and money laundering scheme funneled through a web of offshore accounts." Her eyes bored into Adrian's. "Proof that was given to me by another one of your victims, Adrian. It seems your past has finally caught up with you." Chaos reigned. Board members, their faces ashen, stared at the damning files in their hands. Adrian stood as if turned to stone, his empire, his life, his very identity disintegrating before his eyes. He was no longer a king, just a criminal exposed on a stage. Anya raised her voice one last time, a clear, final judgment. "Your CEO is a liability this company can no longer afford. The board has a choice. Remove him now, or Phoenix Enterprises will initiate a hostile takeover at market open tomorrow. And I will personally ensure that every single one of you who stands by him shares his fate." It was checkmate. The board, motivated by the one creed Adrian had ever taught them, ruthless self-interest, did not hesitate. The vote was swift, brutal, and unanimous. He was out. As security guards, the very men who served his will moments before, gently but firmly escorted the broken man from the stage. His vacant eyes met Anya's. He saw no triumph in her gaze, no gloating, only the placid, unyielding finality of a debt that had finally been paid in full. The king had been deposed not by a rival army, but by the queen he had created in the crucible of his own cruelty. In the end, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclamation. Anya Sharma. The woman born from Isabella Blackwood's ashes didn't just take his company. She built a better one. Phoenix Enterprises under her leadership became a titan of industry, known not just for its innovation, but for its ethical practices. She proved that success doesn't have to be paved with the ruin of others. Adrian Blackwood faded into obscurity, a modern-day Lear raging against the storm of his own making his name a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Anya never denied Leo the truth of who his father was, but she taught him that a name doesn't define a man. His actions do. She had disappeared with nothing but the child he rejected, and returned with the one thing he could never understand. A strength that wasn't built on power, but on love. What did you think of Anya's ultimate checkmate? Was it justice, or was it a revenge as cold as his own heart? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.